Okay, so we've learned how to operate with complex numbers. Let's see how that helps us when we solve equations that have imaginary solutions. We're going to do we'll do two problems. So say we have something like x squared plus 16 equals 0. To solve for x, I would subtract 16 from both sides. X squared equals negative 16. Then I take the square root of both sides, remembering to write plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 16. Well, the square root of negative 16 I can write as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. The square root of negative 1 is I, the square root of 16 is 4, and we typically write the number before the I, so plus or minus 4i is our answer. So we have two imaginary answers, plus or minus 4i, positive 4i and negative 4i. How about this one? Let's do okay, to solve this by taking square roots, I need to first get x minus 3 squared by itself, so I'm going to subtract 4, then divide by 2. Subtract 4. Divide by 2. I take the square root to undo the squared. So I have x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 12. And finally I add 3. So x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 12. Well, I can simplify the square root of negative 12. First of all, if we take the square root of a negative, we know we're going to have an imaginary answer, so there should be an I. So what we do for that is we write the square root of negative 1 times the square root of positive 12. The square root of negative 1 is I. Now the square root of 12 I can simplify because 12 has a perfect square factor in 4. So x equals 3 plus or minus, the square root of 4 is 2, so I have 2 times I, square root of 3. So I have two answers. I have 3 plus 2i root 3 and 3 minus 2i root 3. And I'm pretty sure this is the form in which we write it. You might see 3 plus or minus 2 root 3i. No, 2i root 3 is typically how you see it, even though this is correct as well. So we'll leave it like how we have it. Alright, so we can solve equations that have complex solutions, meaning these are not real answers, these are imaginary solutions. If we were to graph these, if I were to graph x plus 16, or if I had to graph this, there would be no real solutions, there would be no x-intercepts.